Welcome to the frontline, where history comes to life. Dawn breaks on December 2nd, 1805, and the French army is already shaking from the cold. Frost covers their coats, breath hangs in the air, and a thick blanket of fog hides the valleys below. Napoleon stands on the ridge above the village of Pratzen, staring into nothing but white. Beneath that fog lies the combined power of Europe, Russian and Austrian armies stretching for miles, convinced the French are weak and on the verge of retreat. What they don't know is that Napoleon has spent days shaping the battlefield exactly as he wants it. He has deliberately weakened his right flank, pulling troops back to make it look exposed. The Allies think they see an opportunity to crush that flank and roll up the entire French line. They think they're about to win the war. Napoleon knows they're walking into a trap. Before sunrise, the French positions are nearly silent. Soldiers stamp their feet, rub their hands, and tighten their belts. Officers whisper orders, checking the lines. The fog is so thick that men can barely see 10 steps ahead. Below, the Russians and Austrians begin shifting their massive columns, moving south, exactly as Napoleon hoped. The sounds carry upward, drums thumping, shouted commands, thousands of boots crunching frozen ground. The coalition armies believe they're executing the perfect attack. They think Napoleon has overextended himself. But every step they take opens a hole in their center, the Pratzen Heights, the very ground Napoleon has decided will decide the battle. Around 8 in the morning, Napoleon rides forward. His marshals gather around him: Soult, Lannes, Bernadotte. He asks Soult if his men are ready. Soult answers they can take the heights in 20 minutes. Napoleon nods and waits just a little longer. The fog must lift. The Russians must commit deeper. Timing is everything. For a moment, the battlefield seems frozen in time. Then slowly, as the sun rises, the fog begins to drift apart. Beams of light shoot through. The sun of Austerlitz, the moment Napoleon will speak of for the rest of his life, breaks across the hills. Napoleon raises his hand. A single order: attack. Soult's corps surges forward. French infantry march in tight columns into the blinding sunlight, bayonets shining. The fog peels back fast now, revealing stunned Russian officers scrambling to react. They thought the French center was weak. Instead, they watch an entire French corps charging uphill straight into the heart of their army. Musket volleys crack across the slopes. Drums pound. Shouts echo off the ridges. The Russians try to form lines, but their units are scattered, mid-movement, caught between orders. French battalions hit them like a hammer. Within minutes, Soult's men reach the Pratzen Heights, driving the Russians back step by step. Fighting turns brutal: bayonets, musket butts, hand-to-hand combat. The heights shake with the weight of thousands. A Russian counterattack slams into Soult's right, but French reinforcements arrive instantly. Napoleon has been waiting for this exact moment. He sends in more divisions, and the center collapses in less than an hour. The Russians fall back in confusion, lines twisting and breaking. Officers shout conflicting orders. Dragoons charge in every direction. Napoleon's trap has snapped shut. As the French secure the heights, they look down the slopes and see the chaos unfolding below. The Allied armies have been split in two. Their southern columns, the very troops that marched away to crush Napoleon's weak flank, now realize they're cut off. They're trapped between French forces on the ridge above and frozen lakes behind them. Napoleon orders a full assault. Cannon are dragged onto the heights and pointed down. Gunners fire into the packed Russian units, shells bursting, tearing through formations. The retreat across the lakes turns into a disaster. Thousands of Russian soldiers run onto the ice as French artillery pounds their positions. At first the lake holds. Then the cannonballs begin cracking it open. Huge fractures ripple across the water. Ice breaks under the weight. Soldiers fall in by the hundreds, dragged under by gear and weapons. Horses panic, wagons tip, shouts and screams echo across the valley as men claw at the collapsing edges. In minutes, the frozen lakes become graveyards. Back on the heights, Napoleon watches calmly as his army tightens its grip. By midday, the battle is already decided. The coalition army is shattered. Austria's pride is broken. Russia's elite forces lie dead, captured, or scattered. The news spreads across Europe in days. Napoleon has destroyed two great empires in a single morning. Generals who once dismissed him as a lucky upstart now call him the greatest commander alive. Courts across Europe panic. Kings rethink alliances. Diplomats rush to rewrite treaties. Austerlitz changes everything. Austria sues for peace. Russia pulls back in shock. The old order of Europe collapses in a single winter. By nightfall, the battlefield is quiet again. The fog returns. French soldiers warm themselves by fires on the captured heights. Napoleon walks among his men, congratulating them, telling them they have earned a place in history. And they believe him because on this day, Europe shook. Armies broke. Empires fell. And Napoleon stood alone as the undisputed master of the continent. 1806 begins with Prussia making the mistake that will destroy it. Convinced Napoleon is distracted in the West and that France is stretched too thin, the Prussian court declares war. Officers cheer, nobles boast, and the old Prussian army prepares for what it thinks will be another Frederick the Great-style triumph. But Napoleon responds instantly. The Grand Armée moves like nothing Europe has ever seen. Corps march in parallel columns spread across Saxony, each one fully capable of fighting alone for a day. Maps open, orders fly, and tens of thousands of French troops sweep through forests, villages, and mountain passes at a speed the Prussians can't comprehend. By early October, the French have outmaneuvered an army that still relies on rigid formations, outdated communication, and commanders arguing over plans from the last century. As dawn rises on October 14th, Jena and Austerlitz become the day Prussia collapses. At Jena, Napoleon personally leads the attack. Fog covers the hills just like Austerlitz, but this time the enemy is slower, confused, and already outflanked. French skirmishers push forward, bayonets ready, while artillery fires non-stop from the ridges. Prussian troops try to form lines, but every attempt is too late. Napoleon's corps hit them from multiple directions, breaking formations before they fully form. The battlefield fills with smoke as French infantry surge forward in wave after wave. Within hours, the Prussian forces at Jena fall apart, officers fleeing, units surrendering, drums and flags tossed aside. But the real disaster happens at Austerlitz, where Marshal Devout with only one corps meets the main Prussian army. Outnumbered nearly 3-1, Devout doesn't retreat. He attacks. His troops fight with brutal discipline, firing volleys at point-blank range, repelling cavalry charges, and standing firm against the best units Prussia has left. By midday, the entire Prussian army, under its own king, is collapsing in panic. Devout's victory is so overwhelming that Napoleon himself can barely believe the reports. In a single morning, 2 Prussian armies cease to exist. The retreat turns into a catastrophe. French cavalry fan out across the countryside, hunting scattered survivors. Entire columns are captured without firing a shot. Roads fill with abandoned cannons, broken wagons, and wounded soldiers limping into captivity. Fortress after fortress surrenders as French officers ride up and demand terms. Some governors give up without even inspecting their defenses. The Prussian military, once feared across Europe, evaporates in days. Napoleon pushes relentlessly. The Grand Armée covers more ground in a week than some armies march in a month. Every time Prussian troops try to regroup, French cavalry arrives first. The campaign becomes a chase, and the chase becomes humiliation. By the time the French reach Berlin, there is no army left to defend it. Murat's cavalry rides into the city unopposed. Citizens watch in silence as French flags rise over the capital. Officers who once bragged about fighting Napoleon now hide in houses or flee east. In the royal palace, French troops find symbols of Prussian pride, standards, medals, portraits of old victories, and Napoleon orders many of them sent to Paris. The message is clear. The old Prussian state is finished. Newspapers across Europe announce the unthinkable. Prussia, the kingdom built on military glory, has fallen in less than a month. Napoleon immediately begins reshaping the region. First, he imposes the continental system, forcing Prussia to cut off trade with Britain. Merchants protest, but the French military presence leaves them no choice. Then come the indemnities, massive payments meant to weaken Prussia permanently and fund French expansion. Prussia loses half its territory, carved into new states that answer to Napoleon. The Kingdom of Westphalia is created, ruled by Napoleon's brother Jerome. Germany is reorganized into the Confederation of the Rhine, a collection of states tied directly to France. Old borders disappear overnight. Old alliances crumble. Napoleon redrafts the map of Central Europe as if he were rearranging furniture. The shockwaves spread everywhere. Austria watches helplessly, fearing it will be next. Russia begins questioning its own ability to fight France. Britain studies the collapse with alarm, realizing that Napoleon now dominates the entire continent. Even within Prussia, the collapse sparks panic. The royal family flees, the army lies in ruins, and national pride is gone. Reformers emerge, trying to rebuild an army and government that won't be humiliated again. But for now, their kingdom is at Napoleon's mercy. By the end of 1806, Napoleon controls nearly everything between the Rhine and the Vistula. In barely 6 weeks, he has erased Prussia as a military power, conquered its land, emptied its treasury, and made Europe understand that he isn't just a general. He's an empire-building force unlike anything the continent has ever seen. Austerlitz showed his genius. Jena and Austerlitz show his dominance. And Berlin under his banners shows the world that resisting him will come at a cost no nation wants to pay. Winter 1807 turns Poland into a freezing graveyard as Napoleon drives the Grand Armée east in pursuit of the Russian forces refusing to give up the fight. There is no glory in this campaign, only mud, sleet, hunger, and endless marches across frozen fields where men collapse from exposure and horses die standing upright in the snow. Soldiers sleep on frostbitten ground, muskets jam from ice, and entire units march with rags wrapped around their boots. The Russians withdraw deeper into Poland, luring Napoleon into a landscape of blizzards and waist-high drifts, but he refuses to slow down. By February, the two armies finally collide outside a small village called Eylau, and nothing about this battle resembles Napoleon's earlier triumphs. Dawn rises through a snowstorm thick enough to blind entire regiments. French units stumble forward unable to see more than a few paces. Augereau's corps, ordered to advance, becomes lost in the white void. They drift sideways, directly into the concentrated fire of Russian batteries hidden behind the storm. In minutes, the corps is shattered. Thousands cut down, Augereau wounded, flags trampled into bloody snow. Russian infantry surge forward, bayonets flashing in the storm, crashing into the French center. Even the Imperial Guard is shaken. For the first time in years, Napoleon faces the real possibility of a catastrophic defeat. Desperate to stabilize the line, he orders Murat to charge, and Murat unleashes one of the greatest cavalry assaults in European history. Over 10,000 horsemen thunder forward in massive waves, sabers raised, hooves pounding into the snow. They smash straight through Russian infantry, through gunners trying to reload, through entire brigades caught in the open. The ground trembles under the weight of the charge. French dragoons and cuirassiers carve a path through the heart of the Russian army, then wheel around and charge again to break the counterattack forming behind them. For a moment, the blizzard clears enough for soldiers to see the full scale of the chaos, bodies scattered across fields, cavalry locked in swirling melee, infantry firing blindly through drifting snow. By nightfall, neither side has a clear victory. Tens of thousands lie dead or frozen. Napoleon holds the field but gains nothing except a grim lesson. Russia will not break easily, and this war will not follow the clean patterns of Austerlitz or Jena. The Grand Armée leaves Eylau shaken, stunned, and exhausted, but Napoleon refuses to retreat. Through spring and early summer, the French regroup and resume their pursuit. Russian forces under General Bennigsen try to pull Napoleon into another grinding battle, but this time the emperor responds with precision and speed. He maneuvers his corps across rivers and through marshes, cutting off Russian communication lines and forcing their army toward the town of Friedland. By June 14, the Russians make a fatal mistake. They mass their entire army with the Alais River behind them, leaving no room to retreat. Napoleon sees the trap instantly. "Here is the battle you have asked for," he tells his marshals. "Now it must be won." French artillery opens up from commanding ground, blasting Russian formations packed too tightly to maneuver. Infantry divisions sweep forward in coordinated waves, pushing the Russians back step by step toward the river. Smoke thickens over the battlefield as cannons tear into the Russian center, turning the riverside fields into a killing ground. Panic spreads among the Russian ranks. Officers shout orders no one can hear. Soldiers crowd the riverbank, trying to escape across bridges already collapsing from overload. French volleys hit them from every angle. As the French pressure increases, Russian command structure falls apart. Bennigsen's lines crumble. Units drown in the river trying to escape. Napoleon's final assault crushes the last pockets of resistance. Unlike Eylau, Friedland is clean, decisive, and total. The Russian army is beaten so thoroughly that Tsar Alexander has no choice left but diplomacy. Within days, envoys approach Napoleon. The long Russian resistance finally bends. The French pursuit across Poland, through snowstorms, frozen marches, and some of the worst conditions Napoleon's army has ever faced, ends with the Russians forced into talks, and Napoleon once again standing as master of the battlefield. 1808 explodes without warning as Napoleon turns west and tears open the one front he should have left alone. He overthrows the Spanish monarchy in a move so arrogant it shocks even his allies, dragging King Charles IV and his son Ferdinand into exile, while French troops silently pour across the Pyrenees under the excuse of protecting Iberia. Once inside, the mask drops. French columns march into Madrid, take the palace, occupy the city squares, and expect obedience, because everywhere else in Europe, Napoleon's enemies have obeyed after a few quick defeats. But Spain is different. On May 2nd, the 12 de Mayo uprising detonates. Civilians, butchers, priests, students, women, even children erupt across Madrid armed with knives, stones, farming tools, anything they can grab. They stab French soldiers in alleyways, drag cavalry off horses, swarm isolated patrols, and fight with a fury the Grande Armée has never faced. French troops respond instantly and brutally. Firing squads line the streets. Bodies pile up in plazas. Neighborhoods burn into the night. Yet instead of breaking the population, the repression lights a wildfire. Across Spain, guerrilla warfare explodes overnight. Entire villages vanish into the hills, transforming into insurgent bands. They ambush small French detachments at dawn, blow bridges with stolen powder, and vanish into forests before the French can respond. Convoys are wiped out on mountain roads. Couriers go missing. Supply columns are hit again and again until some refuse to move without an escort of thousands. French marshals report that the enemy is everywhere and nowhere, and morale plummets. Every valley hides a trap, every farmhouse a lookout, every shepherd a spy. The French retaliate with mass executions, torching towns suspected of helping partisans, but it only fuels the cycle. Spain becomes a black hole that swallows divisions whole. And just when Napoleon needs the war to quiet down, Britain intervenes. Wellington lands with disciplined British troops, professional infantry trained to hold fire until the perfect moment. They join Spanish forces in the hills, turning guerrilla chaos into coordinated resistance. French marshals, veterans of Austerlitz and Jena, find themselves losing battles they should have won. Lines break, ambushes succeed, supply depots vanish in smoke. No city stays quiet. Even after French victories, the countryside rises up behind them. Napoleon marches into Spain personally and defeats the main armies with ease, but the problem never goes away. Every time he wins a set-piece battle, the mountain passes erupt again. Every time he pacifies a province, another revolt explodes somewhere else. Spain drains France's best troops, best generals, and endless wagons of gold. The Grande Armée, which conquered Europe with speed and firepower, is suddenly stuck in a war of knives, shadows, and peasants who refuse to quit. Napoleon wins battles but loses the country. And the longer he stays, the deeper the wound spreads into the empire he worked so hard to build. 1809 ignites with Austria rising yet again, refusing to stay defeated, launching a bold attack while Napoleon is still in Paris. The emperor hears the news and reacts instantly, riding day and night, covering hundreds of miles, reaching the front before half his generals expect him. He finds his forces scattered, outnumbered, and pushed back across the Danube, but he wastes no time. Bridges rise, pontoons stretch across the river, and within days Napoleon's machine is rolling forward again. The second he crosses the Danube, the biggest battle of his career erupts at Wagram. 2 days of thunder, 2 days of endless cannon fire. French guns and Austrian guns trade blows across a vast, open plain turned into a killing ground. The first day ends in chaos. Neither side breaks, both armies staggering in the smoke. At dawn on the second day, Napoleon unleashes wave after wave of infantry, trying to crack the Austrian line. Columns march into storms of grapeshot, battalions collide in brutal close-quarters fighting, and the battlefield becomes a furnace. When the French left begins to buckle under the Austrian counterattack, Napoleon pulls off one of the most audacious moves of his career, ordering MacDonald to form 3 full divisions into a giant hollow square and march straight into the Austrian center. It's a human battering ram, a walking fortress of bayonets and drums, taking fire from all sides as it plows forward. Men fall by hundreds, but the formation keeps grinding ahead until the Austrian center finally breaks apart. As the gap widens, Napoleon floods the hole with fresh troops, artillery, and cavalry. The Austrian line collapses, the army retreats, and Wagram ends with another decisive French victory. Austria, bloodied and shocked, sues for peace again. But the consequences go far beyond the battlefield. Napoleon forces Austria into a political union, marrying Marie-Louise, the teenage daughter of the Austrian emperor, tying France to one of Europe's oldest dynasties. It's a move of pure imperial logic. If war can't keep Austria down, marriage might. With the new alliance sealed, Napoleon's empire reaches its absolute peak. France stretches from the Pyrenees to the North Sea. Italy is under his control, either directly or through kings he appoints. Switzerland sits dominated. The Netherlands fall under French administration. The Illyrian provinces line the Adriatic like stepping stones. Germany is reshaped entirely under his Confederation of the Rhine. Dozens of old states swept away and replaced with streamlined, loyal kingdoms. Westphalia, Naples, and Spain all sit under thrones occupied by Napoleon's brothers, marshals, or political creations. The emperor redraws borders at will, dictates law, rewrites economies, and commands one of the largest military machines Europe has ever seen, millions of men feeding the Grande Armée, thousands of cannon, a web of alliances stretching from Warsaw to Lisbon. After Wagram, no coalition dares challenge him immediately. France controls the continent. British ships rule the seas, but Napoleon rules everything that touches land. At this moment, right after the smoke clears at Wagram and the ink dries on the treaty with Austria, the Napoleonic Empire stands at its greatest size, brightest power, and highest confidence. It is the summit before the fall, the final moment when Napoleon truly holds Europe in the palm of his hand. By 1812, Napoleon stands at the height of his power, but the cracks are already spreading beneath his feet. The continental system, his grand plan to blockade Britain by shutting down all European trade with the island, begins choking the very economies he controls. French merchants suffer, German factories stagnate, Italian ports rot, and Poland starves under endless taxes. The entire continent grows tired of Napoleon's rules, but no nation feels the strain more than Russia. Tsar Alexander initially agreed to Napoleon's economic war, but reality hits hard. Russia's economy depends on exporting grain and timber to Britain. The blockade destroys Russian profits, cripples its nobles, and ignites massive unrest. Slowly, quietly, Alexander begins stepping away from Napoleon's orbit. Smugglers flood Russian ports with British goods, Russian diplomats stall French demands, and behind closed doors the Tsar prepares his army for the inevitable break. Napoleon watches all this with rising fury. In his mind, Russia defying him is not simply disobedience. It is the unraveling of everything he built, the beginning of rebellion across Europe. Determined to stop it, Napoleon makes the most disastrous decision of his life. He prepares for a war of intimidation, a quick campaign designed to frighten Russia back into obedience. Instead, he sets in motion the destruction of his empire. He raises the largest army Europe has ever seen, over 600,000 soldiers drawn from every corner of France's dominions. Poles, Germans, Italians, Dutchmen, Swiss, Spaniards, Croatians, an army of 20 nations marching under one emperor, believing they are invincible. The columns stretch for miles as they cross into Poland, drums beating, cavalry glittering, artillery rolling forward like thunder on wheels. But from the very first days, the cracks begin to show. Supply lines can't keep up. Villages are stripped bare. Horses die by thousands. Food rots in the summer heat. Soldiers desert to look for water. Disease tears through the ranks long before a single Russian musket fires. And then Napoleon crosses into Russia itself, expecting the Tsar to offer battle to defend his borders, to fight for every inch of ground. But Russia refuses to play the emperor's game. Instead of battles, Napoleon finds empty fields, burned villages, abandoned towns. Wells poisoned, crops destroyed. Russians retreat endlessly, leaving nothing behind. The French chase shadows across an empire of distance. Every mile stretches supply lines thinner. Every day drains morale. Napoleon's scouts ride ahead expecting to find the Russian army ready to defend a ridge or a river, but there is only silence and smoke. The French soldiers begin to sense it. They are not marching toward a decisive victory. They are marching into a trap. Russia's strategy is simple, ancient, and brutal. Let time, distance, and hunger do the killing. Napoleon pushes deeper anyway, driven by pride, fear of looking weak, and the belief that one huge battle will still end the war. Weeks pass. The heat becomes unbearable. Dysentery, fevers, and fatigue kill more men than combat. The Grand Armée begins to melt without ever seeing the enemy face to face. Finally, occasional Russian forces appear, only to fight small skirmishes, then vanish again. Napoleon grows irritated, then frustrated, then genuinely uneasy. Nothing in his career prepared him for an enemy that refuses battle. Nothing prepared him for a war that stretches across endless plains, where every village looks burned, every river feels poisoned, and every night more men disappear. The march becomes a nightmare, wagons sinking in mud, horses dropping dead in ditches, soldiers collapsing on the roadside and never getting up again. And still the Russians refuse to stop retreating. The French officers whisper among themselves, "This country is too big, too empty, too merciless." Napoleon finally realizes the truth, and realizes it too late. He has stepped into a war not of strategy but of time. Russia is not trying to defeat him in battle. It is trying to exhaust him, stretch him, starve him, and freeze him. The deeper he marches, the more the empire he built begins to crack behind him. What began as a campaign meant to intimidate Russia is turning into a slow, grinding disaster. Napoleon keeps marching forward anyway. He cannot retreat without losing everything. He cannot stop without looking weak. He can only push deeper into the endless Russian interior, unaware that the worst is still ahead. The fires of Moscow, the long retreat, and the winter that will shatter the Grand Armée forever.